Hello. Now we are going to talk about the decorators. In the last lecture, we had discussed about the closers, right? Where we have written the code to count how many times function has been called, right? So it was counting the number of functions. Again, so consider these functions we have. We have the counter function which takes the function as an argument, as a parameter. Then we have this count variable which is a local variable to this counter functions. Then we are defining the inner function which takes generic arguments and the keyword parameters. Then we are using the same count variable over here by using this non-local keyword. We are adding this value by 1. Whenever this function will execute, count value will be executed by, or it will be added by 1. So count variable will execute and added by 1, and then it will print function 0 was called one time. So 0 is for this, so it's a function name, and 1 is for the what is the count value. So we are using a string format, and then inner function will return the function itself which takes arguments and the keywords, these parameters. And then so when the counter function will execute, it will first execute this code, and then it will, after defining, it will return the inner functions. First counter 0, then inner function will return. Then this, when it return the inner function, it try to understand what the inner function is, right? So counter function is returning this inner function, but inner function itself returning the another function, which is the same argument function that we are having, right? So this is a 3 loop functions we have, right? Now let's try to run this. Now here we are running, here we have created another function add. It takes 2 parameter a and b and return the sum of a and b. Right, when we check the help of add, we can see the documentation of add functions, right, which is the expected. We can check the memory address, which is having the memory address of the every functions, right? Now we create a closer using the add functions as an argument to the counter functions, right? Again, when we do see, so how do we do that? We'll simply say counter, and then we'll pass add. So we are executing the counter function. As a function, we are passing add. Again, remember, we are not returning the add, we are just passing this add functions. And then because this counter function will return the inner function, which itself return the function itself, the add function itself, right? So here we are creating, so we have created the add variable. In that add variable, the same function has been passed, or same function will be called, right? So here when we check the id of add, the id of add is a totally different now, right? It is pointing to the different, it is this address. When you try to execute the add 1 and 2, we are getting function was called one time and the value is 3. So this ultimately what we are saying is we are running the inner functions, right? Because counter function is returning the inner functions, but the inner function has not been executed yet. So now ultimately is what we're trying to do is we are trying to execute the inner function, which is executing the whatever the function we are passing, or add functions, right? So when we say add 2 comma 2, here we say function was called 2 time and then the value is 4. So here this output we are getting because this things, right? So function name, so the function name is what? Function add was called 2 time we are getting, right? So the question is, what happened that we put our add function through the counter function? So here what we have done is we have created a closers. This is also called closers, right? But when we put a add function inside a counter function, we usually say that we have decorated our function add. That means we have added some extra functionality of add function. That's what the meaning is. Because now our add function is, instead of returning just the output, which was meant to be, it was meant to be just returning the output 2 plus 3 or a plus b, but now it is also printing something extra, and this is happening because of the inner functions. So counter function has a functionality, has a another function called inner function, right, which has, which is using under the hood, which is running under the hood, and then we say that we have decorated our add functions, right? And that's why we can call that counter function is a decorator, right? Instead of calling this way as a decorator, instead of assigning this way like function equal to counter of add, like here we have done add equal to counter of add, instead of creating a decorator this way, we can even create decorator in this format. Like here we're saying at the rate counter, then we have this function. So this means that whatever this function is doing, now it will be controlled by the counter, right? Or you can say that now it is decorated by the counter. That means counter function will take handle of it. It will execute this function when it is necessary, right? By adding some extra line of code or like by adding some extra functionality. And that is why we use the decorator to add the extra functionality to the base function. This is our base function now. Now when we run this, and when we run this mult 1 2 3, what we are getting? Function mult was called one time and then we are getting 6. So this means that now this code and this pattern of writing the code both are same thing. So now this mult has been decorated, and now it is in the control of counter function. Here if we run this again, we can see that it was called 2 times because we are running the same function and the value we are getting as expected. We can check the name of the function. If we'll check the name of the add function which we had created earlier, again when we call add, then we are talking about this add which was created like this, right? We are not talking about this add now, we are talking about this add which is in the control of counter, right? And when we check this, the name, what we are getting as, so the name of the add is inner, because ultimately now the inner function is executing and inner function is able to execute the add functions. When we check mult.name, it is still the inner, right? When we check the help of add, this add, we are seeing this help of inner functions. So this signature pattern that we are seeing as of the inner function, same thing will happen with the mult. So now everything is behaving like the inner functions, right? Even the documentation have also changed. We have also lost our parameters. So in the mult function we have the 3 parameters a, b and c. In the add function we have the 2 parameters a and the b, but now the parameter is also different now, right? So what about the introspecting the parameter and of add and the mult, which we have already discussed, but we can do this using inspect function. We can check the get source, it will give you the source code of the function, and this is what the source code we are getting. It's the source code of the inner function, the same thing we have discussed, right? We can also check the signature. So the signature will also be different now. Here signature of both function is different now. We can even check the parameter. So the parameter is this arcs and quarks, right? So everything has changed now, right? We can do, or like what we can do is, here we're trying to put back our function name and the doc string whatever it was earlier. So we have changed the counter function, we have changed our here is a different version of the counter function. Everything is same except now we are changing the name of the inner and the doc string. So the name of the inner would be the name of the function and the document will be the name of the, so the original function document. So now the inner name and the documentation will be the original function. So now we are back on track. Here we can see that when we create this add function with the counter decorator, when we check add, help of add, we are getting add now. Now we are not getting the inner. Earlier we were able to, earlier here we were able to get the inner, right? But now we are getting the add as a name, right? So this is the documentation. So this is the documentation we are getting. Return the sum of two integer, but still check these arguments are still the same. We have not changed the argument. So the argument, and then when we check add the name, it will be add, right? So again, if you try to put everything back on track, it will be a difficult, right? But in the func tools module, we have a special function called wrap. Actually, it's a decorator itself, right? So wrap is a decorator which try to put the everything you want, right? So which try to kind of keep the name as name of the function as the same name, which will try to put the argument, which will try to put the same documentation, like everything, right? So here we can use this. We can first import this from the func tools. Now this inner function has been decorated with the wrap, and then inside the wrap we are passing the function. That means whenever this inner function will be executed, it will be, so the most of the things of the inner functions, most of the metadata of the inner functions will be the metadata of the function itself, with like whatever the function will be, whether it is add or multiplication, right? So here we have wrapped this inner function. Now let's try to do this. When we again create a counter with the add, when we check the help of add, now we are back on track, right? So parameter is still the same, name is same, documentation same. We can get the source code. So the source code is still same. We can get the signature. It is still the same. We can get the parameters. It is still the same. So now with the help of wrap function, now you will be able to get everything, every documentation and everything as the same as the whatever the function, like this functions we have used, right? And this is what a basic decorator meaning is. So decorator is additional functionality which try to behave like a different function, or which will try to change the functionality of that functions, right, in one way or the other. Thank you very much.